In a turbulent market, it's important to future-proof your career, whether you're in role or in between. Gavin Walsh, Regional Vice President at Zendesk, joins me today to share his advice on how to do just that. With an incredible career working with brands such as Google, LinkedIn, WeWork, and now Zendesk, Gavin knows how to lead a successful career and is showing an insight into what he looks for when hiring. This is an absolute masterclass, and I urge you to listen to this episode as we unpack curiosity and why we're so bad at selling ourselves but so good at selling software. He gives advice on how to collaborate, ask smart questions, and learn from others. Lastly, we cover coachability, Gavin's framework, and how to look for a coach. I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's get into it. To kick things off, you have been in the industry for 15 plus years, as you mentioned. Yeah. How do you think the industry has changed when you look at it specifically for progression for ICs, maybe say like 5 years ago to today?
Yeah, I think the number one thing is that the ubiquity of available jobs has decreased significantly. So in the growth and sort of zero interest rates like market that we were in a few years ago, there was a lot of growth, there were a lot of roles, and budget was easy to come by. Yeah. And I think every role or every interview you go to, every role that you go for is so hard fought now because there's so many more people going for the same role. And so maybe my entry into the tech world was maybe a little bit easier than people today. If you're trying to enter it at the minute, it's hyper competitive. People aren't leaving the roles as frequently as they would before. The turnover is much lower. So people are staying in role, like the average time in role is much longer than it used to be. So I think if I was coming into an SDR role today, that would be the big concern, is that there's just not a lot of availability at the minute.
Yeah, and so much competition.
So much competition.
It is nuts. Is there any myths that you'd be happy to bust today? Because, I mean, when I started at Wiser Elite 5 years ago, which is nuts to think that it's been 5 years, we looked at like tenure on somebody's LinkedIn or CV. If you've not been at the company for more than a year or 2 years and you've been quite jumpy, you're probably going to get turned away from a job. But there are conversations about actually it's good to be able to jump around because it's going to give you more skills. Also, you've got to be honest if that's not the right job for you. I think people are afraid to leave because they're worried what it might look like. So what do you see that as truth at the moment?
I think the reality is like some of that narrative still exists. So there's still some leaders in the world, like the tech world, that would probably hold that belief. But I still think that's something you can get past. I agree. I think it's a positive if you've got the right narrative. So I think making sure that your story and your personal like story and narrative is real and it's compelling, so that there's a reason, like why did you go to this company, what were the reasons, did you choose it for the people, the product, the culture, like what are those reasons you chose, and then therefore why did you leave, what did you learn in the 12 months that made you think this isn't the right place for me, or that the opportunity in front of me was just so good that I had to do it. I do think there's probably a limit, so jumping around a little bit is good. There's definitely a limit at some point if you consistently can't maintain jobs for a period like for more than 12 months. I think there probably is, you need to stay in role and try and learn and build your skill set in that role.
I know we want to talk about the 3 C's, which is something that you hire for, but to kind of get a bit of a lens into what piques your interest, is there a specific message that you've received from a candidate or in an interview, a specific question or something that really stood out? When we're looking at like the world of competition at the moment, it's so important to be that one person that stands out. And what would be that one thing that you'd look for or has impressed you?
I won't get ahead of like the 3 things we're going to speak about, but I don't think it's one thing that candidates do. It's like a myriad of things. But for example, what that often looks like is someone that's very engaged, and being very engaged is asking questions. So they ask questions. At the end, we will always, in every interview you do, they will say, do you want to ask any questions? Very often, I'm the last round of the interviews because they've been through the managers, the reps, other people, cross-functional partners, and they don't have any questions. And that for me is a big sign. It's like you're coming into sales, like a big part of your role is to ask questions. It's discovery and qualification. Like if you don't do that well, the rest doesn't matter. So someone that asks really good, thoughtful questions. I've been on your LinkedIn. I know there's not much for me, so it's a bit harder.
Come on, make it easier for the candidates.
That's why I'm doing it, obviously. But
it's intentional.
I see you're here. What did you think about this? Or how have you progressed in your career? Can you give me some advice? Like just anything. It just shows they're inquisitive. They're thinking. They did a bit of research beforehand. So if there was one thing I would say for interviews, ask like impactful questions. And there's loads of stuff online about how you can do that and think about those questions in advance.
Yeah, that's such a good piece of advice because it's so hard when you're like, do you have any questions? And you probably don't want to ask a ton because you're like, well, then it looks like you've not been listening. But actually, in sales especially, your whole job is about asking smart questions to be able to uncover the pain. So if you can't
100%.
ask a smart question to somebody that's hiring you, then that's kind of showing that you can't do the job.
Yeah, and even if you know the answer, like it's okay that you ask a question you know the answer to.
Yeah.
Because you want a different perspective. You want them to know that you're asking the right questions, even if you've asked for every single person that you meet with. I think that's okay as well. So it's not just about your discovery and understanding. It's about like showcasing that you are the person that can ask thoughtful questions. And
I guess a good way to flip that would be, this is how I've perceived it, and this is my understanding, and then ask a question from that to kind of show, right, Gavin was listening to what I just said there.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
But I'm digging a bit deeper.
Yeah, reflect it back. Yeah, absolutely.
People love it when you use what they say back to them. You're like, God, that is so smart.
Yeah,
and
there's
you're
definitely
like,
some psychology
you just
thing in that, isn't it?
just holding up a mirror, being like, what you said was genius. When we do look at the way that the industry and the world has changed in the last couple of years, we cannot do this episode and future-proofing yourself without talking about AI.
Yeah, of course.
I know we could probably do a whole episode on this, but how would you advise that ICs do stay competitive against the rise of AI and actually using it to their advantage, especially when we look at the role of an SDR? We did a recent roundtable, and some people are getting rid of their SDR teams. That's not something that you're doing, is it?
We're not. No, we're not getting rid of our SDRs. We're investing in our SDRs. I think companies are being more thoughtful about where they deploy both SDR and BDR. So a bit more upmarket. So if you think about maybe lower market being SMB, commercial, and then maybe mid-market and enterprise. So in that higher market, you'll see more concentration of SDR and BDR. That's a good thing. And then more of a 360 AE at the lower and sort of maybe SMB and digital motions. But I think like if I'm a SDR and AE, even a leader, I think it's really immersing yourself in the trends. There's just so much out there. Like there's really no excuse not to be up to speed on what's happening in sales and AI. There's so many tools. There's so many things you can go and try. I think podcasts like this are a big part of that. They're thought pieces, because the big thing is there's no one answer. We're all thinking through it together. Like this is a nascent technology that we haven't really figured out. We don't know how it's going to disrupt. We just know that it will. So your role as a professional is to stay up to speed with the thought, have a point of view on AI, and try some things in your role. Like be really good at prompts on ChatGPT. Like it's super powerful if you can do those well. Advocate for some internal spend on tools. Go and ask your team for that, and just try things. I think just try and immerse yourself in the world of what's coming, and then be part of the disruption, because it's going to come. Yeah,
you do see some people being quite hesitant. They're like, I don't want to look at it. It's not happening. I mean, we had this conversation. There are some older reps that are maybe like refusing to lean into AI, but actually you've got to lean into what's happening in the world
100%,
because it's only going to go quicker than you. And it is a way to really, really help make you a better performer and not actually replace you.
And we have to get rid of that fear, because it's, this is probably like the third big tech revolution in recent memory, first being probably the internet, then the move to cloud, which totally created a new industry in SaaS that I'm a part of and we're all a part of now. And this will disrupt in a similar way. Yeah. People had similar fears to the previous disruptions. And I think if you want to stay ahead of it, you have to embrace it and try it. It won't replace our roles. It will change our roles. It will create roles that don't exist today in the same way.
You have at Zendesk a head of AI, don't you?
We have a head of AI, yeah.
That's mad. So what's her job entail?
That's a great question.
Do you know?
So
is she human or is she a robot?
She is a robot, yeah. Only I haven't met her in person, so it'd be hard to tell.
There you go.
So no, there's Christina at Zendesk runs our AI function, and it's practical, both in influencing our product roadmap, but also thought leadership. So we influence a big industry of CX, or customer experience, and really it's about like how that will be disrupted. Customer experience will really be the first big industry to be disrupted, because it's so easy to disrupt in some ways. A lot can be automated through bots and through chat and all of the different channels that you would engage with a company. It's really about having someone that is charged with thinking about that future and how we are thoughtfully investing in our product roadmap for our customers.
Wow, that's mad.
Yeah.
Who would have thought a few years ago that would not have existed?
a new role that didn't exist.
Right?
what's coming next.
That will not be my job.
Yeah.
I'm the worst person at tech. I'm still
Not
trying to
mine.
navigate ChatGPT. But speaking of embracing it, before we get into those 3 C's, what are some things that you're doing at Zendesk when we talk about high performance and leading your sales teams? Can you share some of the tools that you're using or some of the frameworks that you're using with AI to really help drive that high performance?
Yeah, you know what, we're the investments we're making as a company are really in our product and how we can transform other people's businesses through investing in like new channels for them to communicate with their customers and to help self-service. I think as a sales organization, we're being a bit more thoughtful because we're a big team. You know, there's a couple of thousand people globally. And so we have different pockets of pilots internally. The biggest one is within ChatGPT. So we have an internal iteration of that, and we're looking at workflows and how it can speed up just the sales day to day.
Yeah.
So a big thing that a lot of sales professionals use would be MedPick, which is sales qualification methodology, but it can be quite laborious, even just going into Salesforce, filling everything out. So we have some internal tools that help us take notes and sort of fill that in essentially.
That's clever.
So yeah, it's all of those. And I think that's how to think about it. It's how do you find the tools that can be your co-pilot? And they will be, some of those will be products that companies come up with and you buy them, and you know they're just part of your workflow. Some of it will just be using what's in your internal organization and creating like your own personal processes and workflows that help automate your day. I think there's a reasonable expectation that as an industry for segments of sales that we'll get to like a 360 AE or a go-to-market engineer. There's different like things thrown around, you know, because you have this co-pilot like utility belt of AI tools that can help do these roles. So you can do end-to-end, maybe pre-sales through to customer success. I think that's part of the evolution of how we're thinking about it.
Is there the worry though, because, and I know this is a whole other topic, but that actually sales methodologies can be quite damaging because it's taking the human element out of sales because you are following this framework. And then if you add AI into that, it's even more.
I think yes and no. Like, yes, if it's used badly, but I think AI, for me right now, maybe I'm oversimplifying it, but it's a tool like a lot of other tools. And if we don't use the tool well, then the output will be bad.
Yeah.
If we use it well and we're trained on it well and we understand it well, then I think the output can be positive. MedPick's a great example. You're right. It can be a really frustrating sales process for a prospect or customer if someone's trying to force you through a MedPick process because they've been told that's what they need to do. And really MedPick is signposts. It's to help, like, what's the veracity of your deal and how many gaps do you have to make sure, like, you need to go and de-risk and get answers to know whether this is a deal or not. It's not about forcing a customer down these, 6 or 7 pillars.
I know what you're doing.
You're right.
It's a tick list. It's not a script.
It's not. No, it's not a script. It's not. And that's hard when sales is a hard role.
Yeah.
And the knowledge that has to come with it is a big part of how hard it is. Yeah.
And speaking about it's a hard role, I assume you are a tough person to get through on an interview. What do you think? So? Yeah? I don't know. I feel like you know what you want.
That's probably fair. That's fair.
Yeah. And those things that you want are the 3 C's. Do you want to divulge a little bit onto what those 3 C's are?
So yeah, and this is an evolving like framework, but most recently I think about like how I hire in 3 different ways. So what I look for is curiosity, someone who's collaborative, and someone who's coachable. So they're the 3 ways that I think about like what success looks like in a role. To unpack that a little bit, like curiosity is really the questioning. So as a sales professional particularly, you have to just ask a lot of questions. MedPick is a big part of that. It's just questioning to understand, do I understand and can I implicate the pain? And is the pain big enough to be worth buying whatever I'm trying to sell to them? And if not, we move on to something else. Collaborative is really straightforward, but it's hard. It's, do you have a positive, expanded, healthy network that you can leverage? And are you really good at building relationships and getting deals done? Because we can't do anything like, regardless of your level, whether you're sort of an SDR to the CEO, you need to have a network and be able to collaborate with a bunch of people. Our CEO ultimately has bosses. They have private equity firms, they have boards of directors. So you have to work with people. It's a people game. And then the last one's coachable. So there's 2 lenses to this. One is you as an individual, like being able to be introspective and see your blind spots. And the other is that you're then also willing and able to work on them. so that you want to be coached and you see coaching as something that's useful and vital to you, especially as you're earlier in career, because that's where you have a lot of learning to do. And if you're not asking the questions and you're not open to feedback and sort of identifying your blind spots, I keep looking here because the blind spots are over there. Then
There's nothing behind you, don't worry. It's not Halloween. We've not got a zombie behind you. This is not the Ellen DeGeneres show where she's got something popping out.
That'd be nice though.
Oh yeah, sorry. That maybe next year you're booking with Ellen.
Get me back in. That coachability, like in sales, it does have a bad rap as an industry, and that's because there are some people, like every industry, where the egos are bigger than the job, I suppose, and really we are in a people business, both with each other and selling to people. The relationships are super important, but a big part of that is, where are my gaps? What do I need to do to improve? And, can I take that feedback from my manager or my peers to help me do that?
Self-reflection is one of the hardest things.
Yep. It's brutal.
It's so easy for you to be able to like point out on other people what those areas for development are, but when you actually hold that mirror up at yourself, it's almost like you just don't want to, because you're like, I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole, because you often know, but you just don't want to own up to it, because it's quite frightening. But we'll get into each C as this conversation goes. But to start with, curiosity. So you mentioned questions. What's the best question that you think somebody could ask a potential buyer to maybe really uncover that pain or need for them to buy?
Is there one single question? So the question that used to be like the big thing was, what keeps you awake at night, which isn't a really great question. I think it's more about understanding what are the opportunities that they see in their day or in their workload, that if they could solve them, it would materially impact their day. Because ultimately, when you start a sales cycle, you're selling to a single person first. Like I'm selling to you. You are, I hope, my champion, but I haven't figured that out yet. So your champion's your person internally in the organization that will go and advocate for you and is bought into what you're selling, and will go and like open the doors and connect you to your economic buyer. So it's really about, how do I make them successful? So what does success look like to them? Like if we were to do this, what is the impact of this change going to be on your role, on your career? Is there a promotion potentially? Is there, the next step, whatever that might be? And I think that's often a big part of understanding how big that pain is, and if it's painful enough and big enough to actually, for us to go and invest some time to try and solve.
Yeah. One of the good questions somebody shared with me, and I apologise to whoever this was, because I can't remember who it was, but a smart question of flipping it is, what is the impact if you don't buy us? Yeah,
love that. Yeah.
Because it makes them think, oh gosh, actually, this is something that I need, or actually going like, if you bought this in 6 months, not now. And then that helps with urgency as well, because it makes them answer their own question of why they need it now, not in 6 months.
We use a framework called the 3 Whys. I think it came from a company called PTC, and like from way back in the day. And it's why us, why now, and why anything. So, why do you need to buy now? Why is it time bound? And if it's not, then we shouldn't do it. Why anything at all? Like, why are you making any change? Why did you even pick up the phone? And let's assume time works and you want to buy something. Like, why are we the vendor or the choice for you? And then that's an early part of our discovery and qualification. So our deals.
That's a really good framework to follow. And you mentioned champions. I think often people go down this rabbit hole with who they think is their champion, but actually they are not the right person. How do you identify that? Are there some smart questions that you can share on unpacking? So
the 2 ways we think about that are authority and influence. So when you look at a champion, so someone can be a cheerleader, because they really want the product or they're a user of it and they're going to cheer you internally. But they actually don't have the authority or the influence with the economic buyer to actually get a deal done. And I think that's the thing. Like with champions, it's always, are they senior enough? Not necessarily in a buying position, but are they senior enough, and can they influence whoever the economic buyer person or board is? And they're the 2 ways that we would look at champions and how we qualify them.
You're like, show me your phone book. Do you have them on speed dial?
Who do you know? Well, like specific questions can be, have you bought something like this before? Right. Because if you have, then you probably have authority or some level of influence. And that's a big one. And if they've done that before, then great. If they haven't, then it's about mapping out the organization to understand and if they can't tell you, like the paper process is one part of MedPick. So this is a good example back to your first question, where you don't talk about the paper process to the person you're speaking with, but in your head you're thinking, can they articulate the paper process?
Yeah.
Right. So how do you actually get a deal done here? Is there procurement involved? Are there legal involved? Do you have any other SaaS products that you've bought? Is there a board of directors? Are you owned by a private equity firm? So all of those just different questions to unpack it. And like their response to all of that gives you confidence that they are the person, because they know it, they've done it before, or if they haven't, that they understand the journey you need to go on.
Yeah. I love this point of curiosity and asking questions, and it just seems so much more natural to flow as a conversation when you've got somebody that you're speaking to that is genuinely interested and curious.
Yeah.
But is there a limit and I guess a downside of maybe asking too many questions? Because I know we have touched on if you're following a framework, you need to get so much information from them, but you also don't want to bombard them on that first call. And could you give some advice on how you've done this with your team and how you space those questions out? Is there, because it's quite a specific thing, and also probably quite it's different for each person you're talking to.
Yeah, and the not great answer to this question is that it depends on what you're selling as well. And how complicated your product is, and whether you're selling to an enterprise, where you probably do need to ask a painful number of questions at the start, because the investment required is so significant that if you go and spend 3 months on a deal and you haven't actually got all those questions at the start. For me, it's we start with the 3 whys. And regardless of the deal size or the segment, we would start there. Is there anything here at all? And I think that's it. Okay, let's now pause, and we'll come back with a point of view and go into another conversation. So I think it's more about trying to do that very basic qualification first, and then you can space it out. But in SMB, for example, it's probably okay to try and get a lot of that very quickly, because the deal cycles are so much shorter and so much quicker. So yeah, I don't know if that directly answers your question, but
thank you for giving me a political answer.
You're
answering the question without answering the question. No, that does answer it. It is very specific, and I just think it's an interesting point, because some people can be so fascinated, and then the buyer could just be like, oh my god, calm down.
There is a limit. If you sort of have to earn the right to ask a lot of questions. So if they've come to you, so it's an inbound lead, for example, you've never spoken to them before, and they come in and shown some interest, then you have some ability to ask some questions. Tell me why you're coming. What's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the project? You're interested in X, Y, and Z feature. Let's unpack that a little bit more. But if you're into beyond 30 minutes of asking questions, if the call lasts longer than that, it's far too much. You're trying to level set, you're trying to understand, is there a reasonable fit for me and for you? And then we move on from there. But there are some times where you have to get to maybe an uncomfortable level of questions, because you have to choose whether this is something you invest your time in. And as a rep, you're the pressure of carrying a number and the quota, you have to be ruthless in how you prioritize those deals. So it's there isn't one answer, but I think, too heavy on the first call is definitely not recommended.
Don't be too forward on that
Don't
first
be too
date.
forward on that first date. There we go, exactly.
And to wrap up curiosity, when I was scrolling through your LinkedIn and found a post that you posted 6 years ago,
there we go.
It was an article from Josh Graff from LinkedIn saying that hiring is slowing down, but not because of opportunities, because of skill gaps across multiple sectors and regions. Do you think that that's still true today?
Do I think there's skill gaps? I think and my team, I won't sort of let anything out of the bag, because I've spoken about this for the past 3 years. I think the biggest change for sales from a skill point of view is that we've had a lot of inbound demand. So pre and post COVID, but during that hyper growth period, potentially in the past 5 or 6 years, there's just been a lot of inbound demand, and really we were servicing the demand. New business, particularly in bigger companies like Zendesk, new business was less of a muscle. And I think in startups that's a big muscle, because you're starting from scratch, but in bigger companies it's a bit harder to come by because the demand's so big. So I think the skill change for us and for slightly bigger enterprises is that really having that more core selling skill, where you're going outbound, you're building a book of prospects, you're qualifying them yourself, you're cold calling. Cold calling's back, and it's a really useful channel if you do it thoughtfully and well. So I think the skills, I don't think there's a dearth of skills. I think the skills have just changed because the demand isn't as inbound anymore, and we have to go find it.
Yeah.
We've got to sell true value. Like, that's an overused statement, value selling, but we have to sell value.
Yeah.
And that goes back to, the questions that you ask at the start, because you don't get to value unless you understand pain and how we can solve for it.
Yeah, but the fundamentals are still there.
They're still
definitely.
there,
Yeah. And then when we get onto the second C, which is collaborative, there's so much value that you can get from working with your peers, from managers, people that are maybe more junior in the business.
Yeah.
You should be a sponge and soak up so many different learnings from them. So what is, and I haven't given you this question to prep
here
for.
we go.
Sorry.
You haven't given me any of these, Izzy, but...
No, sorry. That's how I like to do it. Keep you on your toes. What's the best bit of advice that you've learned, or something that you've learned from a person that you've worked with?
Ooh. What is the best bit of advice I've gotten from anyone?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That is a good question.
Anyone.
Anyone ever.
Maybe if we're talking about from being collaborative, working with somebody in your team, like anybody, whether it's a manager, a peer, somewhat one of your reps.
I would say, I'm trying to think how to frame this feedback so it doesn't make me look terrible.
Oh, no, please do.
No.
This is Sales Unfiltered. It's all about being really vulnerable.
I'm from Northern Ireland, and we're like a bit of an aggro type culture, right? So like we're like very aggressive in some ways. That's not entirely true, but
the way that you just
there's a
mimicked
hesitation.
boxing is not aggressive.
They're clearly not a boxer. So one of my bosses gave me really good feedback that literally comes into my head once a week. A lady called Janine Chamberlain, who actually works behind the building here in LinkedIn. She runs, she's the MD for LinkedIn in Europe. And her feedback was, you're awesome, everything's great, but what you have this tendency to like find the negative in things that we're trying to do. And I was like, wow, I do that. Some of it's cultural, but some of it was just maybe to have a point of view or just to like spark conversation. It wasn't necessarily nefarious in any way. And that's the best bit of feedback I've ever had. Probably in general, I would say, because it was so simple, it was really actionable. And from a collaboration point of view, it was probably hurting my ability to collaborate. So if I was coming in and sort of throwing stones at ideas, and it wasn't as direct as that, but I wasn't trying to always find ways to be collaborative and to build up the idea, to find the gaps in it so we can make it better. And so this was like maybe 10 years ago, but super, super impactful and something that still sticks in my head today.
That's a really interesting bit of feedback. Is that because you were trying to like prove yourself as...
Probably, right. There's probably loads of levels of I could unpack. I needed to go and speak to someone professional.
This isn't therapy. That's a whole another day.
Yeah, I would say that it was probably to be a bit contrarian. Intentionally it was... maybe to have like I want to sound interesting, so I'll throw something in that's a bit provocative.
To stand out.
To stand out. Like I don't think it was that intentional, but it was obviously frequent enough that she thought there's a bit of feedback.
That's really interesting. I had a similar conversation with my boss once. He called me up one day and he was like, do you like me? And I was like, yeah, of course. What do you mean? And he was like, I just feel like you've got a problem with everything that I say. Like, you've always got like a challenge, not in like an awful way, but it was just what, and actually that conversation was the best conversation that we've ever had. And I was like, no, gosh, like I actually think that everything that you say is great, but I also am not going to be somebody that's going to sit here and go, yes, I agree with you. I want to work with you, like how we can both collaborate together. And actually, what am I bringing to the table if I'm just sat there like a nodding dog? Agreeing with everything, but it was probably the framing of how I probably put my hand up and went problem, and he's like, "Oh, here we go again."
That's why I think it's such an important point to touch on. It's probably off script a little bit, but like you have a good manager because a lot of managers would gloss over that and just ignore it and let it be uncomfortable or let it metastasize, and then it actually becomes an issue. Whereas you're able to get to a place where, hey, this is cool, this is me, this is you, and maybe you tweak it around the edges every now and again. There's a really good book I'd recommend to people called Radical Candor.
So good. Right. We just
Kim
read
Scott.
that for our Making Moves book club.
Yeah, it's really, really good. And it's really just about how do you do it in a way that is thoughtful and respects, because you got to care personally but be direct. And especially for all the people that are either leaders or stepping into leadership, like don't avoid feedback, because the two examples we just shared, they are career changing. Not only for the relationship with your manager in the moment, but also in the future. And so definitely recommend that. Sounds like you have just read it. So
yes,
we have. Put the Cliff Notes up.
It's very good. I would recommend it. You posted a quote from Scott Galloway, and this kind of links to this collaborative nature and just being having humility, which was every day, no matter how successful we become, we need to earn our success. We need to be kind and appreciative. We need to demonstrate humility. Yes, you're brilliant and hardworking, but greatness is in the agency of others, and timing and others' features of luck is everything.
Yeah.
So when you're hiring, that's quite a hard thing to look out for, is somebody that has humility.
Yeah.
And especially when we're in the game of sales, everyone has their own target.
Yeah.
Most people are in it for money.
Yeah.
They want to take
Yeah.
a big paycheck
That's
at the end
okay.
of the month.
Yeah.
But they also should be working collaboratively with and being a team player. And
Yeah.
it's something I know we've spoken on our prep call when we ran the Elites, our awards night.
Yeah.
It was something that we really, really looked for in the interview process. We don't want somebody winning that is just out for themselves.
Yeah.
It's somebody that's collaborating and helping. So what are some things that you do to make sure that you really understand that they have that?
Yeah, it's so it's really hard. It is hard. It's really hard to figure out in an interview. That's why interviews are such a terrible process, but they're super necessary.
Yeah.
Like who enjoys them? I don't really like doing interviews, and no one likes being interviewed by me.
Yeah.
100% guarantee. But they're a really important part of like how we like search for talent, essentially. And so for humility, it's about how do they speak about and talk about other people. So no matter what we ask them, other people will be involved in the deal. Now, there's some like schools of thought out there. You should only speak about your impact, and that's important. You got to like showcase your impact, but it can't be at the expense of everyone else that's contributed to that. And that's the big thing I'm looking for. It's not one specific question. It's throughout their whole conversation. The conversations we'll have, we'll probably have 3, 4, 5 conversations with them. How do they speak about other people? Like, what's the tone they use about their company, their manager? One of the questions I ask is, if I was to speak to your team today, what would they say about you? And just leave it and see what they say. And the thoughtfulness at which they respond shows me that they were a good team player or not, that they had good relationships because the answers got depth to it, or not. And so I think that's a big one. But it's sort of peppered throughout all of the questions, like how do they speak about other people and the impact that they've had?
Gavin, you know I'm going to ask you.
Go.
What would your team say about you?
Oh my goodness, what would they say? Oh, is there a job at the end of this?
Yeah. You can't say it and then not expect to get it back.
Yeah, fair enough. I should have thought about that. My team would say, I'll ask them when I quoted this so they can tell me the real answer. What would they say? I think as a leader, I have a good balance of, I want them to all have autonomy. So the big thing I say to them is, at the start of every year, I want to leave you better than I found you. So like that's my motto. And that actually came from Josh Graff, who you mentioned earlier, who was one of my leaders at LinkedIn. I was like, we want you to leave. You will leave here eventually. You will leave this team, you will leave this company, and we want you to leave, in my world, a better sales professional. And so that's something that I really try and strive for, so that I'm very proud of the number of people we promote, the pay rises that we give, the skills and the training we bring the teams through, so that they can exit a better sales professional or further advanced in the career they want to be in. May not be sales, and that's part of the journey to figure that out. So yeah, I think a manager that gives them autonomy, fun, it's a really big part of my leadership style, is that we're having fun.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it's really important. It is. It's a hard job. It's high pressure that we have to have fun. But I demand excellence of myself, firstly, but also my team. So it's sort of the price to entry. Like, show up every day consistently, not hit your number, because you don't control that all the time, but you do control the inputs. Like the investing in yourself, like making the calls, like all of the stuff that, adds up at the end to you hitting a great number and having a great career.
But I love that you need that excellence from yourself, because your team are going to want to work harder for you if you're also pulling your weight. Yeah. You have to lead by example.
Yeah. There's a great, I don't know if you do links in the show notes or whatever, but I'll send this GIF that came up recently. It comes up every quarter, where it's just cars going down the motorway and it's saying VP of sales, and this big hand just comes and moves the cars that are already moving. And there's that perception that some leaders will just come right at the end and jump in, how can I help with this deal? And the deal's 90% done. And it's same with managers. And really our role is to come alongside people from the start. how can we de-risk this deal? How we can make it go faster? How can we increase the size of it? How can we help you be successful?
Yeah, get in the car with them.
Get in the car with them, right?
Yeah.
So that you're
I
there
love that
before it
analogy.
starts.
We will put that in the show notes.
There we go.
And so the last thing about collaboration, and we could probably go down a whole rabbit hole around this, but you are leading the whole sales function. So how would you recommend that teams collaborate with each other to be the most effective team instead of individuals?
Yeah, it's a really hard one because we need people to be internally motivated for their individual success. You mentioned money. It's a big part of sales, and that is okay. Do not be like ashamed of that.
Yeah.
Like that's a motivation that we all have. I think I'll answer your question directly in a second, but just as a sort of overlay,
That's fine.
the biggest thing is change. One of the recent changes with COVID is that it's made relationship building harder because everything's remote, or a lot of it's remote. You're in the office. This office is full today. It's great to see. There's loads of energy. At Zendesk, we're in 1 day a week. We probably haven't found the right rhythm yet, and I think we'll get to that next year. But there's a tendency, there's a risk that we can become keyboard warriors, and that's really destructive to collaboration. So as I think about it, like I have a couple of just internal rules that I share with my team. You know, if you have to email more than twice, you pick up the phone. Anything like important you want to try and do face to face. And like a lot of things like going to the gym or, building your career, it's in the small moments. Like the smaller moments matter than the bigger moments because cumulatively they all add up to something. And it's the same with relationships. Respect the people, like show and give respect to the people around you, particularly the people that are working for you, quote unquote. So the teams that support you as a sales org, and invest in it. Like I think take the time to be thoughtful about it. So have those coffees, when you're in the office. If you come to the office and just do Zooms, like just don't bother. Stay at home. Part of being together in a space is to be together and to build these relationships. You do not need to be friends with everyone. Like that is not an expectation, nor should it ever be. But you should probably have some meaningful relationships in work, and because that's part of the joy of coming to work and doing a great job and staying in a company for a long time.
If you're specifically maybe an SDR, how would you advise? Because I know you have mentioned like working with your AE, sitting with them on demos. Kind of soaking up instead of just because it's difficult for you, and we've spoken about this, progressing from an SDR to an AE within different organizations is hard because people want to see that you've done that job. But how can you do the job if you don't get given the opportunity? So that's why most people move internally so that they can progress throughout. But what are some key things that you can say, whether it's SDR to AE or AE up into management, that people can really pick up those skill gaps to collaborate?
So I think if I'm an SDR and I want to move into AE, like the big thing for me is just exposure. Let's assume you're building the relationships already because you work with AEs every day on deals. You speak to a lot of customers or prospects. So it's not waiting for permission to go and like seize the opportunity that will get you to your next level. So for what I see in behaviors and really good SDRs would be they will look for A's that they have a good relationship with and then ask for work essentially. So can I take a small customer and run a full cycle of the deal end to end? I see in your calendar, you're going to this meeting face to face in London with Wiser. Can I come with you? I can play a small role. I can help put the agenda together. I can build some of the deck, whatever that is. But just things that you can not only build your sales utility, but also you can use when you go into an interview. Yes, I don't have selling experience, but you don't expect that because I'm an SDR. But here's what I have done, and it shows that tenacity. It shows that you're able to build those relationships, and someone's putting trust in you to go and actually, give you a customer or bring you on site with them. Yeah.
And I think it's just showing that initiative as well.
That's it.
That you're actually interested in developing and upskilling yourself instead of, as you said, waiting for that opportunity. Nothing is going to fall into your lap. And especially, I know it's for both genders, but specifically for women, you need to put yourself out there more. I have this great story that I shared on my LinkedIn about my mum that she, funnily enough, was actually a recruiter, and she wanted this job as manager in her firm, and she was the top performer. She was doing so well, and somebody that was newer in the team got given that opportunity, and she said to her manager, why did he get given the opportunity, not me? And he said, oh, you never expressed interest in management. I thought that you were happy where you were. And she was like, no, I've been working my socks off. Like, I've tried so hard. And he went, oh my gosh, you'd be perfect. But I just never knew.
Yeah,
you have to speak about it.
Yeah, you have to be... so there's two things I'd say. You have to build a board of directors. There's this concept where you have a board of directors that have your best interests at heart. It can be internal and external, and it's probably a mixture of mentors and coaches. That's not that easy to do, but Google this if you like the idea. You got to build a constituency of people around you that will give you feedback. Good, the bad, the ugly, and also be your advocate internally. You absolutely have to have internal advocates. So the price to enter there is to do your job really well. Then you've got some currency to go and spend, and find those people that can be influential and can be on your board of directors that can go and advocate for you. But you're right, you have to ask. It won't come to you. It definitely won't. I
love that analogy. Recently went to an event and somebody spoke about exactly that. They said, I see myself as a business.
Yeah, inshallah, I love that. Yeah.
Treat yourself as a business. Who do you need as that board of director? And that brings us perfectly onto the last C, which is coachability.
There we go.
Thank you for giving me that segue. You're like, come on, as you wrap it up. You mentioned at the beginning, holding up that mirror to understand the areas that you need to be coached on. Yeah. I've just recently started getting a mentor. It's the best thing that I've done ever. But to be able to be mentored or to be coached, you need to really understand, and you need to be the person to say, hey, Gavin, I need help on X, Y, Z. Yeah. Having that self-reflection is so important, but it's so difficult to do. Yeah. Can you give some key bits of advice on how to really uncover those areas for development?
So I think you do need... distinction between mentor and coach. So mentor is generally someone that will help you with a skill. So you're trying to be a better sales professional, you med picks a challenge, or you lose deals at stage 1 and 2 of your deal cycle. I need someone that's more experienced to help mentor me. And then a coach is someone that can just help you learn to solve and identify problems. And they generally just ask a lot of questions.
And a coach can be your manager.
Coach can be your manager, and should be. You should be doing coaching with your manager. And I think some of this is, I've been super lucky to work for some really good companies where they've trained managers and leaders really well. So some of this I know isn't realistic for a lot of people listening, because they don't maybe have the manager that knows how to do this well. And so they have to go and solve for it themselves.
It's a really good point. Somebody actually said that you do a good job. So we'll get back to this, but you do a good job, you get promoted. And then that you're expected to all of a sudden lead a team, but you've not been actually trained on how to be a good leader.
So
it is bonkers.
So the poor people that you manage for the first 2 years of your leadership experience.
They suffer,
they may suffer, you don't know. So I think it's a bit like don't ask for permission. You should be asking for and soliciting feedback on a regular basis. And if you're not, you're missing a massive opportunity. If you're not getting it from your manager, you will work with people that can give that feedback to you. And a really good exercise, I don't do this as often as I used to, but just having periods of self-reflection. So what's gone well, what hasn't gone well, what are the things you were proud of? What are the things you weren't proud of, maybe? And what do you... for me, it's always what is the action I'm now going to take based on that? So for me, it's generally skill-based. So what skill do I want to develop, or how do I want to show up in meetings differently, or how do I want to lead differently? And actually just taking that time out of your phone, out of the day-to-day, and spending it can be 20 minutes, and you do it once a quarter. And you just reflect, and that's your feedback. If you don't have a good manager or a good leadership structure, there's a bit more of a burden on you as an individual to go do that and solve for it, and to find mentors and coaches that can help with that. I think reading, it's a big part of it. I always say education is the great equalizer. So no matter what, no matter where you're from, particularly in UK and Ireland, education creates an equal playing field. So the more you can amass your skills and your knowledge and read, listen to podcasts, whatever it might be, I think that can be a big part of it as well, because it will help you think about blind spots you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that you want to learn, you probably know how to do it yourself. You just need the confidence, and knowledge is power, but you kind of probably need to hear Gavin saying that, and you're like, oh, I knew that all along, but actually hearing you say that is just going to solidify it.
Totally. And it's time and place. So you will have 100 things that you could write on a list that you want to fix or improve or iterate on. But it's what's the impactful thing today that, the one thing that will move the needle for my career or for the year ahead, whatever that time frame is. If you're an SDR trying to get to AE, like, what is it? And what are the 2 or 3 things that you need to work on that will get you there?
Yeah.
Not the 100 things that will help you become the star AE in enterprise. You're not there. You're not even an AE yet. So it's like, what are the 2 or 3 things to help get you there?
Yeah.
And because otherwise you'll have a big list of things you'll never do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gavin, thank you so much.
Yeah,
this has been so
Thanks,
interesting.
Susie.
I'm so sorry for asking you some tough questions that you weren't prepared for. But the one question that you were prepared for, which is what I ask every guest on Sales Unfiltered, is what is one challenge that you faced in your personal life or your career that's really shaped you to where you are today?
I know you did give me prep time, but
You didn't do your homework, did you?
I'm joking. I was thinking about this because it starts as personal but impacts professional.
Perfect.
And I spoke about, I actually gave it away earlier around this like education. So I'm from Belfast, Northern Ireland, has a storied history, let's just say, as a region of the UK and Ireland. And for me, like the biggest impact in my life has been education. So I didn't come from a wealthy background, largely working class. My parents, always put food on the table, but it was a stretch. I would say every month there's probably like a fair summary. We were a family of six kids, 3 boys, 3 girls. So yeah, in a 3-bed house. So like, a lot going on. Yeah, nice and cozy and warm. Heating was never an issue. But for me, it always stands out, and something I'm really passionate about is education, because it is the reason that I'm in the role that I'm in today, that I've been exposed to the countries that I visited, to the people that I work with, to the cultures I can be a part of. And that's only because, I chose and invested in my own education, but there was a system of education that helped me do that. So I think that's probably been the most transformative thing, and it stays with me to today. So it's a big part of how I, in this sort of evolution through AI, my big lens I'm trying to look through is how, as a leader, should I lead differently? How can I make sure I lead my team better than I found them? And like that generally starts with education. I'll read, I'll listen, I'll think through things, I'll come up with ideas. So yeah, I think that's probably been the most transformative.
I love that.
Yeah.
And one of your 3 C's, curiosity.
There we go. Exactly.
So at the end of this interview, Gavin, you've got the job. Well done
Thanks
for
so much.
exemplifying the 3 C's.
That was easy.
Well, I should try harder. Thank you for sharing that story.
Thanks
I really
so much.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I think, it's just really incredible to hear about, I guess, what makes you tick today has all stemmed back from that childhood, which is really fascinating.
You've unpacked a lot for me there. So.
Yeah. Thank you, Gavin.
Thanks
I really
so much.
appreciate you coming on the channel.
Cheers. Thanks, Izzy.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Sales Unfiltered. If you enjoyed this conversation, I would love for you to hit the subscribe button. And if you're feeling extra generous, leave us a quick review. See you next week.